Hey, my name is Cedric. With the Studio Wildcard team, I am the lead community manager. I've been with the team for probably about 4.5 years.
And I'm Jesse Rapsack, one of the co-founders, co-creative director. Been here since the very beginning, late 2014, and still cranking away.
So you guys have your ARK 5-year anniversary coming up. What's it been like on this journey? Because you guys had a long journey even before. You guys were in early access for a long time, and then you released, and it's still a huge thing. How does it feel 5 years later on this journey?
Yeah, well, we were in early access for a couple of years. During that 5, we were in development for about 9 months before we launched early access in June of 2015. And it's definitely been a ride. I mean, when we started with early access, it was still relatively newish. There's been a couple big titles in it, but we saw it as an opportunity to really kind of engage with our community and get their feedback on how to make a game they wanted to play, because there had been some high profile survival games and stuff like that, and some hadn't done very well and others had, like Rust, for example, but we didn't feel that we had necessarily the internal scale to create a game that was a large open world game without a lot of input from the players. And we didn't want to spend like 2 or 3 years making something and then put it out and everyone's like, this isn't the game we want. So for that reason, early access was really appealing to us. And right from the moment we started, we thought, man, this is a really different way to develop games, because we were just every day, every week with the community talking about stuff, making balance tweaks, making number changes. It's in some ways very stressful because you don't get to like sit back and just relax because you're working on a live product almost from the very beginning. But at the same time, I think it led us to create a game that people are really passionate about as part of the team almost. It's like the community is as much a part of the team as some of us are, because a lot of the things that we've done for the game are because of their feedback and suggestions and things of that nature. So over the first half of that 5 years being kind of in early access was really fun, crazy time. And then as we got to 1.0 release, which was a couple of years ago, 2017, and kind of sort of put a little bow on it. Didn't really mean we're stopping development, obviously, because we're still working on the game, but it allowed us to kind of shift that a little bit and slow things down with the update pace slightly, and kind of like as a development team take a breath and say, okay, we wanted to polish a bunch of bugs and do some quality of life improvements and transition to like a live game model. And so the journey over the 5 years has been a very interesting one, I think, for the team, as the studio's both grown from just 9 people in the very beginning to probably over 100 people working on the game now. A lot of us distributed, a lot of growing pains as the team's first real title together. And I think where we're at now, looking back with the community we have, the game we have, and the future of the franchise and the team together, we're super excited. That's why we're happy to be both expanding the game's audience after 5 years, creating new content, and looking to bring more players into the fold. So kind of a long answer, but I think that it's been fun for all of us. Cedric, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, you stole everything, Jesse, but what I will add is, I'm a little bit different in the sense that Jesse, obviously had this vision with, everyone that he worked with when they were creating this game. Me, I saw this game as a fan. I had, the game launched early access. I put in 1,000 hours easy, and it may sound like that's normal, but for me, like I've never put 1,000 hours in the game before, ever. So for me, that was pretty monumental. And I saw the pace at which, Jesse and the team were putting out updates, and, I just had to be a part of it. I knew that I wanted to be a part of this growth. And, I thought when I joined the team, I thought they would slow down on the updates, and they really didn't. I thought like, oh, this is just early access. They're just new. They're just putting out updates. They want to get them out there. And honestly, it never stopped. So the 5 years for me, it almost feels like, we just started, just because of how fast we move, how rapidly we iterate, how passionate everyone is. You know, it feels like we just launched, to me, just because of how the times move. So it's been also encouraging to see the community growth. You know, ARK has always had a very vocal community. I was part of that vocal community, screaming at the devs, saying fix this and fix that. But I think our community has, in 5 years, has grown. You know, I'm engaging with people on Twitter that I talked to 3 years ago, and they're telling me about moments that they had and moments that they saw on the stream. That part is really heartwarming to me, because honestly, I create a lot of valuable relationships through these engagements with the community. So for me, it's honestly seeing that community growth over 5 years and how strong this community really is.
Yeah, it's crazy to see how far you guys have come. I remember years ago interviewing. His name escapes me. I want to say Hendrix, but I don't know not sure if that's right.
Cade.
It was
Cade,
Cade,
yeah,
think.
yeah. He was one of the original senior designers.
Yeah, we talked to him in like at E3. There was no booth. You were just you had like a station at the Microsoft booth, and like we talked to him like without PR in the corner of the booth, you know what I mean? Like where like nobody knew what ARK was. It was like a brand new thing. It was coming out on recently, and I remember it vividly because a couple years later, you guys had a huge booth at PAX where you could ride a T-Rex, and to see it come from, you know, this, like you said, a humble begins of like 9 developers just messing around, looking at the survival formula and see what they can do different, to the epic moment of a T-Rex being able to ride at PAX, being rid by another T-Rex. I don't know if you remember that picture went viral. There was a guy in a T-Rex outfit who rid. Yeah, just to see that course was incredible. And I think Cade's at HoloLens now. I think that's where he works. When I talked to him a few years ago, I'm not sure where he is now. But just to see that growth in general is really cool, because it's just you don't see that kind of growth in games nowadays. You know what I mean? Especially original games. They're usually all spin-off sequels, or, you know, some kind of mashup of like non-original IP, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and add on to that, talking about that first show, honestly, to even see the growth of us as a studio, I remember that first show and we were literally setting everything up. I mean, us at the employees, Jesse was out there. I mean, everybody is out there. And now we're at the point where we work with companies that help us set things up, and we have booth support. So even from that minor aspect, to see that growth, it's honestly kind of humbling to look back and remember those times of setting up the show and setting up the booth. Obviously, we didn't set up the T-Rex. That probably would have been dangerous for everybody involved. But, you know, we did a lot of the other
work. Steel reinforced. There was like multiple levels of legal papers people had to sign to climb up that thing from us and from PAX.
So, Cedric, can you talk about how you work with the community when someone comes to you, a player or a fan, and they have something positive or a problem with the game? Like, what's the process in handling that, and how do you get that information to the development side to either be looked at or fixed? Because I know a lot of the things, especially in game development, like these players don't have data, and something may seem broken or not working, but actually it is working according to your data. How does that work in your position?
Yeah, it's kind of multifaceted. I'm a data nerd, I'll be honest. I'm a data nerd. Jesse probably knows this. I'm always sending him data. I'm always asking him about data. But I don't like to get too lost in the data because, you know, emotions, you can't really quantify emotions in the data. You know, we have all this sentiment thing that I do a lot of sentiment tracking with words and telling me whether it's good or bad. So we have some things that are getting close in the industry, but there's nothing like actually engaging and talking to people. You know, a computer can't tell me anything that I can't gather from that. So honestly, my approach is it's conversational. I probably average, you know, 200, 300 tweets every day on Twitter, and that's talking to people. That's not actually just, you know, sending tweets out. That's having conversations, engaging with people. So when someone comes to me, you know, and I feel it's important that people are heard, and I feel like it's important when people have critical feedback, that you don't ignore it. I think a lot of times devs get the backlash that they can't take criticism or they never respond to criticism. So often a lot of what I respond to is criticism. And I think it's important to acknowledge people's feelings and emotions and things about that. And what I also do is, so then I collect the information going back to stats and data. A lot of times I'm on all of our operations calls. I'm on a lot of the design calls. I'm on a lot of the calls that the people that are making these design changes in the game. And honestly, it just comes down to presenting my case. I think as a community manager, you have to have a voice, you have to be influential, and I have to be able to use that power internally as well. I have to be able to influence my team to listen to the community. Of course, the community always has things that they want to see and things that aren't going to be necessarily good for the game. So, the designers and engineers have to take that into consideration. But me, I'm more of the neutral party. I look at myself as a contractor for the community. I work for Wildcard, but I'm contracted by the community, meaning I'm kind of fighting for what they want. And in other words, I may not always get it, but I'm always fighting for what they're asking for, whether it's right or wrong.
I think one of the things that people tell me about community managers in general and their relationship is, imagine a community manager is in a ball pit, and each different color ball is a problem or a comment. They have to sort through those balls, then put them in a river that goes down to the devs. And that river can be 100 miles long or 2 miles long. Like, it will get there. It just takes time, and you have to sort through all the balls.
Yeah, and I think it's important to also note that I don't always bring criticism and negative feedback to the team. A lot of what I do is pull out all the positivity that's coming from Twitter and in these social media channels, and I'll make a big collage and I'll send it to the team. Here's what everybody's saying about this latest update. Here's what everybody's saying about the work that you're doing, because I know as a developer, because I actually did dev work for the team as well. I know as a developer, it's easy to get lost in these comments that you see online, and people are very vocal about the things that they don't like. So I think it's important to surface all the positivity that people are saying to keep people motivated.
So Jesse, the word, chasing trends is something that people always do in the gaming industry. I feel that the survival genre was never a trend, but it had been done before. But then I feel when ARK came to the surface and actually started to make waves and became very popular, we started seeing a ton of more survival games come out of the woodwork. Stranded Deep and a bunch of these other ones that just kind of came out of nowhere after ARK's success. How does it feel to kind of be the person that, kind of like the Blizzard aesthetic, where you looked at a game and said, well, how can we make the survival genre better? And then you were able to do that, and then have a bunch of people essentially kind of take your game and spin it off in different ways, try to improve yours. But yours is essentially the one that's lasted the longest. We were just talking before the thing, you're still just on Steam today, you had 84,000 players, and the game's 5 years old, which is really impressive.
Yeah, it feels really crazy. Jeremy, my business partner, we've worked together for a long time, even before this. And he's had a lot of experience with building games that communities really love to engage with. And I think for us, that's one of the differences of ARK compared to the other survival games maybe that are not as successful or aren't as sticky. We've managed to find, I think, through the sort of mix of things that are unique to ARK, which we feel really is, the taming and the writing of the creatures, and there's so many creatures. And even though it's not super complicated AI like you might see in like a single player game or a more focused co-op game, it's still like a living, breathing world that you're in with a bunch of other players. And I think that's still something that's kind of unique even among survival games, to have both opposing players, or if you're PvE players that are kind of working with you, but also that sort of ecosystem of computerized entities, in our case, dinos and creatures that are there to engage with you. And I think that's one of ARK's core unique features, and it's really hard to do, actually, technically. It's not just about game design. I think, people might look at hey, we used Unreal Engine, so, it's easy to replicate that and make the game. But, there's a lot of survival games that have come out and use Unreal Engine, and, they don't have as much AI as ARK does. They don't support as many players as ARK does. And that's because we spent a lot of time with our, frankly, very talented technical team to make sure that those things worked, and rewrote a lot of the Unreal kind of server performance stuff in terms of like making sure we could have so many things in the world with so many players without tanking the servers. That's why even though our servers, occasionally crash and go down, and we have to address that, I would say overall, when you look at the play field of these type of games, ARK servers have a pretty good uptime. There's a lot of players on them all the time. And we've also tailored the game, I think, to allow people to play it the way that they want. And I know that's another thing that Jeremy is really big on is giving players options. And if you look at ARK from the very beginning, you know, I would say one of the weak points of ARK has probably been our UI, but that's because the UI has so many things that we needed to do and account for and be flexible to players. And for example, when you want to host your own server, there's just so many options, whether you're playing on console or PC, to tweak on that server and really play the game the way that you want. And it just goes back to like what makes ARK unique, and giving players all of that customizability, partnering with, you know, the server hosting platforms to make great UIs for people to engage in that stuff, like Nitrado and the things they do, and other server providers to allow people to host their own servers. It's not just our official servers, you know. So I think that type of stuff has been really interesting when we look at the landscape of what's out there now, and even what we want to do in the future. You know, we don't always do everything right. You know, when we broke off a separate team to make Atlas, we kind of made some assumptions that maybe players want a large open world that they can all play in, and it's very hardcore mechanics and simulating, you know, sailing and stuff like that. And you know, some of that stuff worked, like the sailing mechanics in Atlas are really good, but we found that there was missing some of that kind of consistency, and the world was too big almost, and there was like a lot of challenges in a game like that. And so that, I think, has really informed us for the future. And you know, the Atlas dev team now is making some changes to that game to kind of respond to community feedback. But you know, when it comes back to ARK, you know, we just take a look at what worked for us, and even knowing that there's a magical formula there that we're still trying to look at and make sure we don't break going forward, because we've had other spin-offs and things. You know, Survival of the Fittest was a game mode that we tried, because, you know, this was way before like Fortnite got super popular and everything, but the battle royale genre was like really hot several years ago, just taking off. And we're like, oh, well, we have dinosaurs, let's make a spin-off, because people really like to play that type of game. And it was like something that was very, I think, fun to watch and play, but it was definitely something that we decided was detracting from our core competency, which was, you know, the multiplayer survival game of ARK. And that's why we kind of like put a stop to Survival of the Fittest. Although I did just see some news item today that it's been kind of carried forward by a mod team that's going to release a revamp of Survival of the Fittest.
Yep, it really has.
So I think that's been a learning journey for us as well, looking at the game we made and realizing where the magic lies. And, you know, even with Genesis Part 1 that we recently released, we tried to do some new stuff with missions and things like that. And some of that stuff worked in some ways, and some of the stuff players really didn't like. So for Genesis Part 2, we're making some changes to the way that stuff works, and reacting to the things they didn't like about, you know, Genesis's new mission system and other things about that product, to try to bend what we know players do love about ARK into the new things we want to do, so we're not like breaking the experience they love, and we're sort of adding new fun things on top of it.